How's it going, guys? It's Rickster again, Cure Audio. Today I'm going to be showing you how to go about making those classic kind of snappy old 2010s brostep, drum and bass, electro house kind of like kick drums. So part of me does kind of wish I knew truly how some of these like old sources of kicks were made, because back in the day you didn't kick synthesis was not really at the point it's at today, with stuff like people making stuff in Serum, Kick 2, Kick 3, of course. It's drum synthesis has really kind of come a long way. Like back at the time, most producers, when they'd make new kicks, they were just taking two kicks from two separate places and combining them, typically like a low end kind of kick and a punchy high end kind of kick that you'd like EQ and then put together with some like saturation or compression to get them to glue. But in my head is like, where did the kicks come before the chicken or the egg? I do kind of wish I knew how you got from like original, like old school, like 909s, 808s, 707s kicks and like vinyl, like ripped drums you could like take from old breaks and stuff, or like even hardware samplers, how you get from those to like Vengeance kicks, But that's besides the point. Here's kind of the way I go about approaching these drums, like a kick like this. So I think first of all, it's important to kind of, again, like for this with the snare video, to know kind of what you're shooting for. So I just dragged in one of my favorite kicks in this kind of style. It's the Pendulum Island Part 2 kick. You can find it in the very outro of the song. It's been used a ton by a whole bunch of other producers, just ripped it from the end. And so you can see quite kind of clearly that at the very beginning there's this kind of burst of noise, and then the main low end body of the kick fades in, and you can still see these little jitters as the wave goes through, and that's like kind of the tail that's cutting through, and I'm almost positive it's like the sounds of the rest of the drum mix in the outro, like reverb tails from snares and hats and other effects bleeding over the kick. And so that honestly gives the kick a lot of character, in my opinion, like this kind of crispy, fuzzy, high-end, cool like texture. That's one of my favorite things about the kick. It's also got a really nice punch and snap to it, But here's how I'd go about making a kick like this. So first thing I did, at least, was I used Operator to synthesize a low end. I don't think you need to, though. You could obviously use like a 909 kick. You could use another kick itself. Like if I just go to Ableton and I look at like a stock 909, you can see that they look pretty similar for the most part. I just liked synthesizing mine so I can have it pitch down more. You have that kind of fall in pitch, versus this one after the main kind of hit, it kind of sticks at one note. But I guess what I can go over is I just did this in Operator, just with a pitch envelope. And I'm kind of trying to make it go from like 250 hertz and sweep down to like around 40 to 80 hertz, like around there. That's kind of where you want your kicks to sit. I feel like their main kind of body is between like 60 up to like 90 hertz. So then I resampled it to audio so I could fade it out and whatnot. And then I dragged it into a group. I'm going to turn off the main processing. And so here is that same sine sweep, just with some fades on it to get the kind of shape of the kick that I want. And I turned it down quite a bit, which I'm going to mention later. This click layer doesn't need to be mentioned. In fact, I can delete it. Next is a transient layer. I'm just using this clap that's from stock Ableton. It's called Abstract 3. Just sounds like that. It sounds like a lighter flick, to be honest. Like, again, you can use basically anything. This is what the original sample sounds like, though. I just have a little bit of EQ pulling back on like the main clap frequency. And then I also, instead of just putting a fade on it, because I didn't like how long it rang out for, instead I cut it, and essentially what I did was I cut the clap like right here, and then I crossfaded it with itself, and then I dragged this part down so I can get this very sharp, fast drop in volume without just like choking that part of the sample immediately. Just so I can get some extra little high-end goodness in the kick. Next is a more kind of prominent texture. This is just a Vengeance like breakbeat kick, and that sounds like this. I have it pitched down a little bit, but I mainly just like it for its high end. It's got a little cool snap to it too, which I like. So I have that here. And that's about it. Now to go through actually getting these layers to work together in a way that sounds good. So if I bring this this low end back up to full volume, this kick doesn't sound great, let's be honest. It doesn't sound great. But if you back off this low end, because this is by far going to be the loudest part of your kick besides this little snap at the beginning. So what I find is a great way to kind of pull to make these things hit. Of course, you could use a transient shaper, but what I like to do is pull this actual like the body volume down, you know, by like minus 10 dB or whatever. And then I'll use like a compressor and some pretty aggressive settings to pull the low end back up. You can play with the timings and whatnot, set it up however you want. And then you can see now it's clipping. So I'll just use like a saturator to make sure it doesn't go over 0. And then I'll back off the gain. Then I'll put like an OTT or some kind of multi-band processing on it. Not even really for like the OTT, like, you know, sauce. Of course it works, but it's not really for OTT's sake. The main reason I do it is because of the phase shift it causes. And this is actually a cool little tangent I can show. But what's interesting about phase shift is, let's say I like take a little click by just having a wave start like at a full cycle, you know, like a sample that's not 0. You know, it's a sound that isn't always very pleasant. And if I take EQ3, which in Ableton has quite a significant phase response, people will talk about it. You start getting the click turns into a zap. And I'm not going to get into the real specifics of it, but it's the same way Disperser, the Kilohertz plugin, works. In fact, you start getting this kind of this beginning sound that instead of it being just a straight click, it starts acting almost like a sine sweep. And I think some phase shift can really like help a kick when you're making it pop out in a nicer way. You don't just get like a very clicky transient, but it starts to become a little zappier. And of course, you can really over exaggerate it by throwing like, you know, a disperser or whatever on your actual like kick group. But that's besides the point. I didn't do that. I just used OTT. It also helps kind of pull up the high end to make the kick sound like it's ripped. I love it when kicks have like a little extra texture to them. You know, they got a little, they're still clean and snappy and punchy, but there's like some high end crackle and like tones coming through because you just pulled it out of a song you like. You know, I really like that with a kick drum. So that's what OTT is doing. And then last but not least is just some general kind of EQ and a final soft clipper to really kind of maximize it. I think this is I guess a good time to also mention that because kicks are so dependent, like time wise, on where the frequencies are distributed. Because like at the very beginning, it's a lot of high frequencies, and then as you go down, your pitch gets lower and lower and lower. So this is like a very prime example of like when it's a good time to use an EQ to control the dynamics of a sound, you know? Like if you want the transient to not be as hard and clicky, you can just take an EQ and you can just pull back the high end. Like if I pull this here, and you know, now you end up getting like a kind of kick that looks more like this. And you know, sure, oh, you're low passing it. I mean, this is mainly just a result of me attempting to manage the kind of volume changing of the sound with an EQ, which I think is a very useful kind of process in general, but it's also great for kind of making kick drums look the way you want them to. Yeah, and I guess the last little thing that I really like to do to sell the kick is like it's been ripped, is sometimes I'll layer in like a soundscape sound or like Foley or whatever. Here I have just like the stock Ableton riser ambient chord. The original sample sounds like this. So I just took that and I turned it really quiet and I pitched it up. But when you layer it with the kick, it has this like kind of cool little like pulse in it. And I like the tone it imparts, because you're not going to hear this in the mix down. You know, if you're making like loud electro dubstep music and you have a kick like this is not going to come through the mix. You know, this is It's just so back there, but I think it's just such a subtle, cool quality that I like adding to my kicks that I'm typically doing it. So yeah, that's how you make a classic EDM kick from like 2011.